New Orleans Saints head to Minnesota to take on the Vikings in a series that has had many memorable games. We'll find out if we'll have another one this weekend. We'll talk about it on today's edition of the Saints Insider Podcast. It's Friday, November the 10th. I'm Zach Ewing. Here's Rod Walker, Jeff Duncan, and Matthew Paris. We're here to dissect all things Saints-Vikings, talk about the team, and get you ready for game day. So, guys, I was thinking about this, and Jeff, I wanted to open with you because you've covered the team the longest. The Vikings and the Saints, if you take out divisional rivals, right, because those are obviously your biggest rivals, the Vikings may be the Saints' biggest rival in the NFL right now, given they played an NFC Championship game against each other. They've played some other memorable playoff games. The game in London last year was a kind of an instant classic. I mean, it just seems like every time they get together, something crazy happens.
Yeah, I saw like a podcast with Taysom Hill, did with Kay Adams this week. I guess give her a little plug there, but where they talked about that. And Taysom Hill was saying, yeah, we owe these guys because they've ended some of our seasons recently, especially in the playoffs with some heartbreaking losses. I remember the first year I was on the beat when the Saints went up there and just got annihilated in the Metrodome with Dante Culpepper and Randy Moss. I mean, they just had an incredible team. So, yeah, a lot of history up in Minneapolis and not very successful history for the New Orleans Saints. They've just really struggled there. I think all time they're 4-14 in the city of Minneapolis. No matter what stadium they've been in, they've struggled. And I can still remember the days when they got accused. I think the Saints were the team that accused them. I have to go back and look at it, of piping in crowd noise in the stadium, in the Metrodome, because it was so loud. And this stadium is also, I think, one of the loudest as well. So, a lot of history, even though really not in the same division or anything.
I actually went around the locker room the other day and was just asking a couple of guys about that stadium because, first of all, it's probably my favorite stadium in the league. I just like the way it looks and just the whole atmosphere with the skull clapping and all that. And just some of the players were just talking about how loud it is. I mean, I talked to Cam Dantzler, who actually, he's on the practice squad, but he actually played with the Vikings, and, he said he was just talking about how incredible the atmosphere is there, and they're going to have to try to do their part to quiet their crowd, because if not, it could get really loud. I think it'll be the most hostile environment they've played in this year. I mean, Green Bay was obviously hostile too, I guess, but I just think this one being an indoor stadium is a little different.
Yeah, and there's some similarities between the teams, the passion of the fan bases, the stadiums, the crowds, and also, Matt, it's just an important game. You got 2 5-4 teams looking to kind of take the next step in the playoff race.
It is, and for the Saints, this is the game right before the bye week, and we were just talking about it before we started recording here, but the Falcons also have their bye next week, and so these two, the Falcons and the Saints meet after the bye, so it's like there can be breathing room here for the Saints if they win this one, come out of the bye, and then they beat Atlanta, then you were really kind of in control down the stretch. So this is an important one.
Yeah, a pretty big game all the way around, and we'll dissect it as we go along here. Saints Insider is sponsored by Bank Plus. Their banking decisions are actually made here in New Orleans by local bankers who know the community and take the time to know you. From small business to big business, home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. You can learn more at bankplus.net. Also, like to remind you, subscribe to the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel. Like we see the stats every week where 80% of you guys watching are not subscribers. So come on, just, hit the button. Help us out. Hit the like button. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify if you prefer the audio version for your drive home or whatever it may be. All right, Saints-Vikings. We'll dig into it. I think first and foremost, the Saints are as healthy, Rod, as you'll ever see a team at this time of year. I mean, we start with the injury report. Kendry Miller's banged up. Somebody else a little banged up.
Isaiah
Foskey. But other than that, I mean, you're talking about two rookies who, not that they're not important, but they're not starters or anything like that. I mean, this is as healthy, knock on wood, for the Saints as you'll ever see.
Yeah, I mean, if you asked the Saints about that before the season started, they'd gladly take this kind of injury report. And I mean, the years I've covered the team, I don't think I've ever seen it like this, at week 10 of the season. So we've kind of talked about this. No excuses this season. I mean, you're healthy and the schedule's friendly. So, this team has to show that they're able to beat these other teams with, they're at full strength.
And on the other side, of course, Kirk Cousins out for the season with the Achilles injury, Matt. That Josh Dobbs comes in, leads the big comeback victory over the Falcons last week, and is kind of the talk of the town in the NFL. Also, Justin Jefferson just back to practice from IR this week, but not expected to play on Sunday, and so you're looking at a team on the other side that's pretty banged up.
Yeah, but credit to them. I mean, they've been able to make it work. They have the same record as the Saints going in here. And Josh Dobbs, he's very scrappy. You know, what he was able to do last week against Atlanta was super impressive. I guess my question going into this game, though, is how much is he able to replicate that? Because, you know, if you looked at that game, it was very, you know, Jeff was talking about it as well. Some of the plays Dobbs made, you don't know how sustainable that is over the long stretch, but he's played well. I mean, I saw him when he was in against Arizona. They played Washington the season opener, and Arizona really pushed Washington until the last quarter there. Really, Washington took back over, but he's played well this season.
Yeah, look, I don't think he's going to replicate some of these Houdini escapes he had against Atlanta, but a part of that might have also been attributable that him not being in the system for just a few days, just trying to make things happen. But it was pretty miraculous, and those things don't tend to, be duplicated week to week. But I'd say this: I mean, they've got a talented team, and I think this game, and we may get into some keys here, but in my opinion, this game really comes down to Derek Carr. This is a big game for Derek Carr, in my opinion, because Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator for the Vikings, I think they blitz more than any team in the league. They get really exotic on third down. I saw them in this game against the Falcons. We see the Saints do this a lot, where they bring up Demario Davis and Pete Werner into the A gap, and then they're all standing up kind of, and you don't know who's coming, who's going, who's dropping. They do that times 10. I mean, they actually bring up 8 players. They're all standing up across the line of scrimmage, 3 guys back deep, and each play, I mean, each third down, it's a different group coming, going. So that's going to put a little stress on Carr at the line of scrimmage and the receivers and the backs, everybody getting on the same page communication-wise, pre-snap checks, and making sure they don't make mistakes. And to me, this is a big Derek Carr game. This is one of the reasons they brought him in, was to be able to get them in the right play and out of the wrong play at the line of scrimmage. Going to get tested this game.
Yeah, and with the atmosphere you guys mentioned, Derek's actually only played at Minnesota once in his career. Of course, being in the AFC, it was in 2019. Didn't go well. He threw a couple touchdown passes, but they lost the game 34-14. He was sacked 4 times, and that was anyway. I'm glad you said that, because that's where I was going. We're going to break this down as we always do. We'll start with when the Saints have the ball, and if you want to talk about a Brian Flores defense, you're going to talk about blitzes. Their blitz rate's over 50%. It's 20% higher than any other team in the league. So not only are the Vikings number 1 in the NFL in blitz rate, it's not even close. You're going to see them over and over and over again. And of course, Rod, what that means is you could be under pressure. You could get sacked. We know Carr's numbers kind of suffer under pressure sometimes. But it also means that if you can make the right play, you're going to have guys open.
Yeah, I know we've kind of bragged about the Saints offensive line the past, 3 weeks. No sacks last week. I think only 2 sacks over the last 3 weeks after giving up 16 through the first 6 weeks of the season. So they've played better, but they're going to be really tested Sunday.
Yeah.
And they're going to be tested. And I think Jamal Williams is a back that's done really well as a blocker back there. And he's going to have to continue to play like that for Derek Carr to have some time. I know Derek Carr has put an emphasis on getting rid of the ball on, early in these, on these pass plays, but this week that clock will be ticking in his head a little bit faster, I would assume.
Yeah, there's really kind of 2 ways you can go with this, right? Like we have Jamal Williams on the graphic on the screen for that very reason, because he can pick up those blitzers and chip them and do whatever he needs to do. But the other way you could go is Alvin Kamara. You dump the ball off to him. I mean, you can beat blitzes that way too. And so there's kind of 2 ways the Saints could go here, man.
Yeah, for me, the question is, how effective is Minnesota's blitz going to be? Because if you look at Derek Carr's numbers against the blitz, they're actually okay. He's completing 62% of his passes. When he's not blitzed, it's 67. So there isn't a big difference there. But when he's pressured, when that blitz actually gets to him, he's only completing 51% of his passes. And when he's kept clean otherwise, it's 71%. So, there's a big difference in Carr's, like most quarterbacks. When there's pressure there, they tend to play a lot worse. And so, you look at a guy like Brian Flores, it's not that they just blitz, it's they disguise the blitzes so well. That's something that Derek Carr was talking about in his press conference this week, is just that, what they're able to do. They'll show you the same look over and over and over, but they'll run it differently each time.
Yeah, look, and I think what you said earlier is spot on. There's going to be some opportunities for the Saints to make some big plays. If they can pick who's coming, pick it up with their protection, they can expose the Minnesota secondary. There's no superstars back there. I mean, Harrison Smith, obviously a longtime Pro Bowler at safety. I think the other safeties had a breakout year, but their corners, I think, are vulnerable. So there should be some matchup advantages for the Saints if they can give Carr time.
It could be a big Michael Thomas game if linebackers are in the backfield and Thomas is open over the middle. Daniil Hunter, of course, the other star on that defense on the line, has 10 sacks this year, former LSU star. So, yeah, it'll be a challenge, but I think it's something the Saints – there's going to be opportunities.
Yeah, I mean – I think there will definitely be some opportunities here, and I think this could be a big Alvin Kamara game. I mean, we've seen Carr dump it off to Kamara a lot, and this could be – I wouldn't be shocked if this is one of those games for him.
Yeah, where he gets 6, 8, 10 catches. I mean, it could happen.
Maybe Juwan Johnson continues to get some targets. I think he had 5 catches last week. That's a season high. I mean, he didn't have a lot of yards, but they were going to him more than they have all season.
All right, we'll end this particular segment with this question: what is how many sacks do the Saints need to keep? What number? How many times can Carr get sacked and they're still okay? Let's put it that way. Is it 3 or less? Is it 2 or less? I mean, he's only been sacked once the last 2 weeks, and we think the Vikings probably get to him more than that. But do you guys have a number in mind where they go, okay? And realizing, of course, that there's hurries and knockdowns and these things, other sorts of pressure. But what is an appropriate number for the Saints?
I think sacks are less important than turnovers. Like I'd rather see him eat it and take a sack than throw it into coverage and make a mistake. So I know that's a little bit of a cop-out on your question, but I really think they may get to him. But, the Vikings' sack numbers aren't astronomically high. They're not really getting home a lot other than Hunter. There's not a lot of, their sack totals I don't think are necessarily the problem. It's the pressure, being affected, being rushed and hurried. So they don't need to get up above 3 sacks. I don't think that's a good thing.
Yeah, 3 was going to be my number 2, but yeah, I'm with Jeff. I don't think this about the sacks. I just think it's a matter of Carr being able to handle the pressure and seeing all these guys coming at him and trying to get rid of the ball as quick as he can, and not and he's done a pretty good job of not turning the ball over recently. So it's just going to be a matter of that for me.
I think, Jeff, your point's a good one because the Saints offense, as it's kind of gotten out of these early season doldrums, one thing, they haven't turned the ball over, I think, since the pick 6 against Jacksonville, if I'm remembering correctly.
They turned it over against the Colts, the fumble.
They did fumble against the Colts.
Right, it was Carr. That's
Carr
another thing. Like
he
can't. Yeah. I could see that happening. Where they get in there and they may not get the sack, but they get definitely a strip sack or something like that. But got to just avoid that. I mean, what happens in that stadium? It just starts kind of building crescendo. You make a mistake, the crowd gets into it. It's the same thing that happens to the Dome to opponents. The Saints have to avoid that, like Rod said earlier. Keep that crowd out of it.
Yeah, and that's a good point because the Vikings, they got to be optimistic right now. I mean, they started out poorly this season, lost Justin Jefferson, lost Kirk Cousins. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of people in the Vikings fan base who say, well, this is a lost season. And then all of a sudden they win back-to-back games. So, I think they're going to be buzzing on Sunday, and it shifted over to when the Vikings have the ball. Part of that is because of Josh Dobbs. Matt, you mentioned it early. You saw him play against the Commanders in Week 1. This is a guy who's been a career backup, but he's flashed a couple times. He's had, I think, 3 games over 100 passer rating this year.
Yeah, and Luke wrote about it early this week, but with the Saints struggling the way they do against mobile quarterbacks, we've seen Josh Dobbs be able to get out and run. I think what's interesting about Dobbs is he's not necessarily the run-first threat. He makes his first read and then takes off and run. And if you've looked at the opponents that the Saints have played lately, they've faced a lot of those quarterbacks. Now, maybe Trevor Lawrence isn't like that, but Cam Jordan was saying yesterday that they made him into a first read and run guy. So, it'll be really interesting to see how much the Saints can contain them and whether they can get pressure there, because that's another area, as we've talked about, they haven't been very effective this year.
I was going to say, the Vikings they've invested a lot of draft capital in their offensive line. I think Darrisaw is going to play the left tackle. He's a big-time player. Their center, Bradbury, is excellent. So it'll be interesting to see if the Saints can get home with just 4 against them, because that's the way they prefer to play defense. I don't know if they can do that, though, against this front. This is going to be a little bit better offensive line. I think they have 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, including Ed Ingram, former LSU Tiger, in that front 5. So keeping him in the pocket, maintaining discipline in the rush lanes, paramount this week. Dobbs reminds me a lot of Teddy Bridgewater in so many ways. He, just like Matt said, he doesn't look to run, but he can run. But I think he prefers to operate in the passing attack. But if it's there, he'll take it, and we know the Saints have let a lot of things slip against these quarterbacks lately.
And I don't know how well the Vikings will be able to run without Dobbs, because, I mean, Cam Akers, he got hurt last week, tore his Achilles.
Let Dalvin Cook go before the season.
Yeah, so I don't know if the running game is
Alexander
going to –
Madison hasn't done really much.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think you can keep you maybe can force some 3rd and longs and, make Dobbs have to beat you, and I think that'll, bode well for the Saints if that happens. I do think tight end T.J. Hockenson, I think he could have a really big game. And, he's, with Justin Jefferson out, I mean, he's going to have to be one of their main weapons.
Yeah, who do they match up? Who do they put on Hockenson? That's what I'm curious to see. Do they put May, or do they bring in Matthew? It's a matchup issue, because he leaned on him heavily against the Falcons. That was like a security blanket for Dobbs.
Well, and if you look at their receiving core, obviously Jefferson not likely to play. KJ Osborne had a concussion last week, probably will not play. So you're looking at, is it Jalen Naylor as their 3rd wide receiver, and then Hockenson?
Well, Jordan Addison's really good.
They have Jordan Addison, the rookie. Yeah.
Excellent rookie, and they have I think it's Powell, I think is his name, who scored the game-winning touchdown last week. Yeah. He's kind of a little mini might, option.
But the point is, you're kind of down the depth chart there, right? Like those top 2 options are gone, or at least options 1 and 3 are gone. Let's say.
I think that's something, though, that Kevin O'Connell, their coach, does really well. I mean, he's a pretty innovative offensive coordinator. Spent time with Sean McVay. Was also in Washington for a second, so. And he made a 3-13 Washington team seem much better than, somewhat competent offensively anyway. But yeah, he knows how to get guys open.
I'd be curious to see how the Saints try to defend him. I mean, they like to play a lot of man coverage, and I mean, you do that, and you got your cornerbacks turning their back, and they're not able to really watch Dobbs. So I mean, there's you might have to play zone just to keep an eye on him, or have someone spying on him. I don't know how they're going to try to keep him in check, but you have to do something to watch Dobbs, because he's the guy that determines if they win this game or not.
Yeah, and that's where I was going next, because Dobbs, as much as he's not a run-first quarterback in that he's going to take off and they'll have designed runs for him like Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson or something, he is number 2 in the NFL in rushing yards for quarterbacks. I mean, he does run. And so the Saints, I just feel like there's going to be such an emphasis on this, because they've been burned by Trevor Lawrence and by Tyson Bagent and by Gardner Minshew to a certain extent. I mean, like it's happened over and over and over again. Do they almost overemphasize that, guys, where they're like, hey, let's put a spy on him. Let's do whatever we can to keep Dobbs in the pocket and make him beat us some other way?
Well, I think they have that option, but I think they're going to go in and just play the way they play. That's the way the Saints have always kind of operated defensively. I think for them, it's just about energy and effort. We talked about it on the pod earlier in the week. I just think they've had some complacency a little bit when they play at home against an inferior opponent and they kind of turn it on. I don't think that'll be the case this week. I think they're going into a bye week. They've won 2 in a row. This is kind of a lagniappe game for them. They know if they can get this win, they're going to have a long break. I think the defense will bring it in this game. I really do. And I don't see how Minnesota's going to run it consistently. They're among the worst rushing teams in the league. They're down to, I think Chandler will probably be their main back in this game. So I think if the Saints can just keep Dobbs in the pocket, I don't see how they move the ball consistently on him.
Yeah, I mean, I think the running game is a factor there. Like Rod said, getting them in those 2nd and 3rd and longs and seeing what they can do. So before we go into predictions here on the Saints Insider podcast, a short period on special teams, and then we'll do keys to the game on special teams. I found it interesting. People talk about Blake Grupe's struggles, and he's missed 5 field goals, and 3 of them have been less than 50 yards, which is the kind you like an NFL kicker to be automatic from. The Minnesota kicker has also missed a couple of 40-yard. He's only one of 3, Greg Joseph, between 40 and 49. So kicks are not going to be automatic in this game.
No, I feel like Minnesota's had like a curse of kickers. Just I can't. It was like, what was that game a few years ago, or maybe it was more than a few years ago now? But he missed like a 29-yarder. Was that Greg Joseph as well?
Yeah, I think so.
Or maybe it was. Feels like that's a franchise that can never find a franchise kicker.
Yeah, maybe not. So, all right, keys to the game. We've probably mentioned a few of them, but if you could boil it down to one thing, Rod, what do you say the Saints have got to do to come out with a victory on Sunday?
I think just protecting Derek Carr is going to be the main thing for them. If they protect Derek Carr and the offense is able to, the same things we've been talking about all season, if they're able to convert third downs, score in the red zone, I think they'll be fine. But I think that's going to be hard to do because I do think protecting Carr is going to be really difficult against this defense.
I'll say this, and 100% agree with you, but they have not gotten out to a lead in the first half since New England. The Saints haven't. They have fallen behind big against Houston, Indianapolis, and Jacksonville, lost 2 of those games. And then they even fell behind against the Bears last week.
And the Colts.
At least for a little while. Yeah, so it's been every single week. This defense has got to get off to a good start, get the crowd out of it, get to a lead where you can start to do the things you want to do offensively instead of feeling like you're forced to. So that's what I'll say. Jeff, how about you?
Well, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. I just think Derek Carr has to have a big game. They brought him in to perform in games like this. This is a good team on the road. You need a veteran quarterback. There's going to be a lot on him at the line of scrimmage if they get into these big third downs. To me, this is a big game and a big stretch coming up for Derek Carr. They're going to go on the road to Atlanta after the bye week, and then they get Detroit, who's one of the better teams in the league. So these next 3 games, I think we're going to have a lot better idea not only about Derek Carr but also just about this Saints team.
Yeah, I agree. I think it kind of comes down to how fast Derek Carr gets the ball out. Protection has something to do with that. But if he is going to hold the ball, is he going to take shots down the field? But elsewise, because Minnesota pressures the way they do, you got to get the ball out fast. Sets up a big Alvin Kamara game potentially. But, yeah, he's got to get out the ball. That 2.5 number that everyone always talks about, I think that'll be key for him.
2.5 seconds, yeah, to get the ball out. So it's a big game. The winner's 6-4 and is probably certainly on the inside of the playoff picture, but also you're never a lock to make the playoffs at this stretch. But I did see. I wish I could remember where it was. I saw a tweet of somebody who was talking about playoff percentages, and the Saints with a win are in the 90% range. With a loss, they're in the 60% range. And for the Vikings, it's a little bit lower than that. They obviously Detroit's winning that division by a couple of games, but it's a range of 30% to 60% or something. So this is a huge game in the NFC playoff race. So it's important for both teams. Fascinating game. We've kind of broken down the X's and O's here on the Saints Insider podcast. Appreciate you subscribing. Hit the like button if you like our channel, and on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, a 5-star review also, if you don't mind. Get into predictions now. Saints at Vikings, noon Sunday. Saints are favored by 3 points at Caesars Sportsbook. The over-under is 40.5. We'll start with Luke. Luke Johnson's not here today. He's the odd man out on today's podcast, so I'm going to give his prediction first. He has a higher scoring game, and it looks like maybe a crazy game. I didn't ask him for specifics, but he's got Vikings 24, Saints 23. So it could be one of those games where it comes down to a kick. Could be one of those games that comes down to a late turnover, just like these games tend to do. So that's what he's got, 24-23 for Minnesota. Go around the room. Rod, what have you got?
I picked the Vikings 23-20. I just haven't seen enough from this Saints offense against a good team in this environment to think that they can just all of a sudden fix it. We sort of think they may have fixed some of their problems, but I don't know if I've seen enough yet. So if they win this one, I'll probably start believing and drink the Kool-Aid that the rest of you all are probably drinking.
Yeah, we've been drinking too much Kool-Aid. The last time I picked the Saints to lose was New England. I was looking back through my predictions. So that's how good I've been doing. Yeah, I was the only one to pick them to lose to New England. They win 34-0, and then I've picked them to win ever since. And I'm going to go back to that well. And really, I don't think y'all are wrong that Derek Carr is a key to this game. But I do think that one way or the other, he'll find a way to hit a big play or two. And I think it's the other side of the ball. I think Josh Dobbs is getting way too much hype after 1 week. And Dunk, you said it, like that game was kind of fluky.
Right.
It was kind of a weird game. The Falcons gave it away in a lot of ways. And yeah, what Josh Dobbs, super impressive what he did. to go in there without practicing, and now he's had a week of practice. You think he's going to – the guy's still 2-9 in the NFL. The Vikings can't run the ball. Two of their top receivers are out. How are they going to move the ball in the Saints defense? I just don't. I don't see it. So I've got the Saints winning at 19-13, kind of an ugly game, lots of field goals, and New Orleans holds on in the end and gets to 6-4. Dunk?
Yeah, look, I'm going with the Saints, and I actually think it could be high scoring in a different way, in that the defenses could dominate so much. We could have some turnovers, short fields, and it leads to a higher scoring game. But I'll even go further. I'll pick exactly how they're going to win. They're going to win on a Blake Grupe field goal as time expires, and he goes into the bye week as the conquering hero.
You got a length for us on that field goal?
Yeah, 48 yards.
But see, that's the kind of kick he struggled with, and that would shut all the doubters up if he could.
Yeah, 48-yarder, gets mobbed, carried off the field. I mean, he will be easy to carry off, but that's how we're going into the bye week.
James Hurst will have him in one hand, carrying him up. All right, Matt, bring us home. We got two Vikings picks and two Saints picks right now. So
I'll go the same score as Rod, 23-20, but I'll flip it the other way and pick the Saints. Rod, you mentioned that about good teams. I don't know if the Vikings are as good of a team as maybe, the Saints have kind of feasted on these backup quarterbacks here. It's still another backup quarterback. Josh Dobbs is a nice story, but he should come back to earth a little bit. So got the Saints. I still expect that Minnesota to be able to move the ball, but I like the Saints narrowly here.
Got the Pastronaut coming back to earth, man.
There you go. I like that. The Pastronaut returns to orbit. All right, so we're kind of split here. That's how this game should be. It's going to be a good one. Any final thoughts, guys? Saints head to Minnesota. I know, man, you don't want to sound like a broken record. Like every game's a key game and every game's big. This is not a must-win by any stretch. The Saints will be fine. Let's say they lose this game and then beat Atlanta. That's a bigger game. But this is one that can really set them up well for the home stretch.
Yeah, sets them up well. I just think this is probably as good of a gauge we have on this team as we've had in a while. I mean, I think this is – I know Matt said they're not good, but I do think just the fact this game is at Minnesota, I just think that environment is kind of tough to overcome, especially if you fall behind. So if they can, go in there and jump on them, keep the crowd quiet, and come out with a win, I think that's going to the break on a three-game winning streak will be really good for this team. They've only had one 3-game winning streak in the Dennis Allen era, and that was at the end of last season. So it would be good to be able to string 3 wins together.
Yeah, I mean, Vikings may not be a good team, but compared to the rest of the Saints schedule, one of their bigger tests.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Minnesota, they're a lot they're not good, but you see a lot of these NFL teams where they'll probably finish 7, 8, 9, and they're, if you told me if Minnesota sneaks in as the 7th seed, I wouldn't be surprised. But I just think without Kirk Cousins, their floor or their ceiling's a lot lower, obviously, and so. I think the Saints are kind of catching them at the right time.
Yeah, if Cousins and Justin Jefferson played, no question I'd pick the Vikings.
Yeah, same.
No question. But and if I don't see the Pastronaut coming back to earth sentence in one of our stories this weekend, I'd be disappointed.
If he does indeed come back to earth, at least. Yes. Otherwise, he's gone.
He's out of this world.
Yeah, he's past the moon and exploring other worlds. So, anyway, that's our podcast. That's Saints Insider for today. Follow all of our coverage at NOLA.com/Saints. You can sign up for our free newsletter at NOLA.com/Saints Insider and follow the podcast each and every day. We will have full coverage from Minnesota, including the Saints Insider post-game show after the game. So tune in on this same YouTube channel for that. And also, Matt, you mentioned the Vikings sneaking into the 7th seed. Somebody's got to get that damn 7th seed in the NFC, and it's not going to be a very good team. That leads me into next week, the bye week. We are going to have Saints Insider podcast. Kind of a good time to sit back and take stock of the Saints season, but also take stock of the NFL season and see where things are at. So that's what we'll do next week. So stay tuned. We'll see you after the game on Sunday, and then we'll see you next week during the bye week as well. For Rod Walker, Jeff Duncan, and Matt Paris, and behind the glass we have Norman Bell. Almost called you Norman Powell again. He's not the NBA player. Norman Bell and Robert Young. We appreciate each and every one of you tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Saints Insider.